Okay, this is a very rare occasion that Gordon Michael Scallion has agreed to speak to us through the miracle of cyberspace. Now, I met Gordon, it had to be, it's 15, 20 years ago, I think it was, when we all started out together in the beginning. And he was doing lectures, and I was on the same expos and conventions that he was. So we've done things together over the years, and we stayed in touch anyway. So he's agreed to do this, and he never leaves his home, so he has a TV studio in his house, and we're doing it with the webcam. What's that? They're still playing with our electronics? Okay. Gordon said a few minutes ago that he has been receiving emails from some of the people here. What's doing that? Do what? Am I doing that? I'm sorry. Up there, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know I was pushing anything. Okay, Gordon said that some of you, I'm not touching anything. I am not touching anything. He said that he has been receiving emails from people that are here, that they had questions that they wanted to ask. And what we've agreed to do is to let him do a short talk about, the conditions of the world and what's going on right now. Gordon does not like to be called a psychic. He considers himself a futurist. And if you all remember back years ago, he did produce the maps of the world and the maps of the United States, and we have them for sale out here. So we're going to be talking about some of the things that are going on in the world right now, and then he wants to do the questions and the answers, because he said the questions often trigger the best answers. So the ones who have done the emails, we're going to be lining up back here so that he can see you through the other camera. The ones who've done the emails, I'd like them to go first because he has already screened those and knows what you're going to ask. Okay, Gordon, are you there?
I am.
We're having gremlins playing with our electronics. Making all kinds of noise and things here.
Okay, are we good to go?
Well, loud, you can turn it down some.
All right, well, I want everybody to know that if there's any technical problems, it's a duty of your spirits, Dolores, not mine. Thank you for attending the conference. We stopped traveling several years ago. It just became overwhelming. We just needed to tone back a bit because every time something in the world would happen, like an earthquake or a flood, our institute would be flooded, and it would take us literally months to get caught back up. So using technology now, it's going to enable us to be active again without traveling. And I don't know what it's in your neck of the woods down there, but up here, diesel fuel is over $5 now, and gas is about $4.25. So, you know, it's just going to increase. And later in this talk today, I'll discuss where I see oil going in the future. But for those of you who aren't familiar with what we do here at Matrix Institute, 25 years ago, my wife, Cynthia Keys, and myself started this institute. And it was based on a premise that there were things that I was seeing that were in the future. It started first as a health crisis, and that health crisis led me to explore more about who I really was. My background was technology and things you could measure, things you could chart out. So the world of consciousness and inner dimensions was something totally foreign to me and something I just did not believe in until it happens to us. And in my case, I began to see first in dreams, and then in daydreams, and then in just spontaneous visions. I would see little snippets at first of scenes, and the scenes were in full color. It'd be like you were watching a movie, and they wouldn't last very long at first. Maybe a minute or two would be a long time period, and I'd be observing some scene, some change in the future. Because, for example, I one of the early ones I saw was a map of the United States, and in that map, it looked entirely different. The West Coast had changed its borders. The East Coast had changed. The United States had become divided into two. And as time went on, I saw more and more of these visions, and I started sketching them out. And after a period of a couple of years, I had enough information about the world, literally, that I was able to take and sketch out a map of it. And the next thing I tried to achieve is to find out when these were going to start. When were these changes going to start? And it was at that time that I made connection with what we would all call here our inner self, or our higher self. And this came in as a series of altered states of consciousness. And we found that if Cynthia could formulate questions, very clear, concise questions, and if I was to enter into a meditative state, visions that I used to see, which were snippets, would become extended, and it could extend for maybe 20 minutes or so. And then we found we can get clarity about what I was seeing. The overall theme was that the environment itself was going to go through great changes, and eventually the changes would end up being that we would require new maps of the world. So in 1979, when this all started for me, and then by 1982, when I produced the first map and released it, the general thought was that this man from New Hampshire was really, not too stable. He needed some therapy. And in fact, when I started seeing visions, I did go and try to see if I can get it fixed. I wanted it to go away, and in the process of that, I went through several forms of therapy, just trying to understand it. Finally, I came across a Gestalt therapist who said to me that, he says, look, why don't you just chart out a log, a journal of what you're seeing, and then we'll see what happens. And so my thought was that he's trying to humor me, but at least he wasn't asking me about my mother, my father, my childhood, relatives. The questions he was asking me were all related to things that I was experiencing and I was seeing. And after a couple of weeks of sessions with him, he came to me and called me up one night, and he said, I need you to come to my office. And I said, okay, I'll come in the morning. He said, no, I need you to come now. And it was about 8 o'clock at night. And so I drove over, saw him, and he said, I want you to look at this, and showed me a paper. And it had to do with something dealing with the stock market, actually about metals, precious metals. And he says, this is something you told me 2 weeks ago. He says, and here's the exact number. And at that time, I remember I looked at him and I said, I have to leave. I can't stay. I have to leave. Because it totally took me out of one reality that I was expecting. I thought I was going through like a midlife crisis, and that with therapy I can get rid of this. And now, all of a sudden, there was some validation. So I left, and then the next morning he called me and he said, look, let's get together again. He said, don't give up. He said, we have to explore it further. And so in the next 6 months, we talked on a basis of about twice a week initially, and then he increased it to 3 times, and then he increased it to 4 times. And what we found during that 6-month time period is that somehow I had tapped into kind of a universal consciousness, and that the reason why that happened to me was totally unknown. Wasn't something I was searching for, aware of, nothing that I had read about. But he said, look, he says, in time, he says, I think you'll have some clarity about this. And I decided that it was time to end these sessions. I said, I need to get away from all of this. And so at the time, I was living in Florida. So I moved back to New England, thinking that if I go back, this stuff will go away. And so I got back to New England, and for about 6 months, it did go away entirely. And then one day, knock on my door, and I opened the door, and there was 2 gentlemen there who perhaps in their 60s or 70s, very well dressed in business suits, and they knew my name, and they said, "Can we come in and talk to you about your experiences?" And I was hesitant about letting them in. I said, "Are you trying to raise money for some religion?" You know, I figured it was something to do with that. Watchtower, perhaps, and he said, "No." He says, "We were given your name by our spiritualist community." And I said, what is a spiritualist community? And he said, he says, "Let us come in and sit down with you." And they didn't seem like they were, you know, a threatening couple. So we sat down, and he explained this community of spiritualists that were mediums. And during one of their circles, one of the men that was there had a problem, and he said, "How can I find a solution to this problem?" And one of the mediums at the circle said, "Go find Scallion, and here's his address." Now, at this time, nobody knew my address. I mean, I was just hiding out. Even my family did not know my address. And, you know, so it was amazing to me that they had that kind of information. And then they said something to me. They said, "We were told that if you didn't believe us, that we should tell you that we know that when you were a child, that you had asthma, and that as a child, you had to go to summer school." And I was just floored. And they sat down with me, and then over the period of the next hour, through their guidance and urging, I was able to bring forth some information just in conversations with them that was able to help this person. And I remember I said, "You're asking me questions about medicine." I said, "You really need to see a doctor, not somebody like me, even though, you know, your spirit said it." And one of the gentlemen turns to me and he said, "Mr. Scallion, I am a doctor." And 6 months later, they came back to me and they said, "We just wanted to stop by, tell you that we're going on a world tour, and that he is healed now." And so for the next 6 years or so, I found that people were just showing up at my doorstep constantly. And Cynthia and I would do whatever we could do. Eventually, the guidance that came through me was that, you know, that's not the work that I'm supposed to be doing. The work I'm supposed to be doing is to help people prepare for changes in the planet, and more importantly, a major change in consciousness that is coming about, and that it would come right after the turn of the century. So since that time, we have been publishing information about these changes in the environment. Now, one of the first warnings that we had back in 1982 was that we would know that the environment was going through radical changes, and it would accelerate when we started seeing weather pattern changes. We would see earthquakes and volcanic activity. The earthquakes said and larger in magnitude, that floods would occur as a commonality. Whoops. And that there's your spirits again. So we're now at the point where, you know, if you turn the television on, literally any day, you will see, I mean, the floods that are going on right now are unprecedented. On Friday, there was another major earthquake in Japan. So we're seeing a pattern where the environment itself is changing. And the question, or at least the theories are, you know, there's a multitude of theories of what is causing these changes. On the scientific side, it is that for some it's global warming, that we have done so much to the atmosphere that that's changed the temperature, and therefore it's changed weather patterns. On another side of the coin is that isn't true, that it's just a cycle. We're going through a cycle where we have these things. And then there's a third camp, which is the camp I'm in, which says that all of these things are true, plus the fact that there is something internal to the Earth that is changing. And that something that's changing is the core of the Earth. Now, the Earth core, some circles, some scientific circles, is that it is made up of iron, that it's a solid piece. And my information says that that's not what it is, that it's a plasma. And this plasma rotates ever so slowly, differently than the rotational speed of the outer portion of the Earth. And from time to time, these two get out of sync. They either will freeze or they will slip, much like a fault line might slip, for example. And so the Earth core has been slowly shifting its position. Now, if we look at the magnetic North Pole, what we see is that that is changing and has changed rapidly, more so than any other time that we have reported data. It's moving now, towards Siberia. I mean, there's a major change in the magnetic field, and that is due to the shift of the core of the Earth. Now, with the shift of the core of the Earth, it places stress on all of the tectonic plates, and these plates then start giving off heat. So my information says that since the oceans are 75% of the land mass of the planet, 25% land mass, 75% water, that volcanic activity in abundance occurs in the ocean. We are only aware of what we see on land, and that there is a thermal activity going on to the core of the Earth all the way up to the crust, and that thermal activity is what is increasing temperature and changing currents, water currents. All of this accelerates, and it accelerates. So if we look ahead here in the next decade, we're going to see that every year we'll be breaking records. One of the things that I mentioned in my annual predictions issue in January was that 2008 would see a record-breaking number of tornadoes. Record-breaking. And here it is June, and we've already reached that record. And going on. That was another benchmark to watch for, to indicate that more severe things are going to happen. And so, the question that many people ask me all the time is that, here's nature, how do we change it? Well, there's two things that we can do. One is a very physical thing, where we can become more aware of what we're, getting rid of as far as pollution. We can conserve. There's a lot of those things that we can do, and we are doing. Now, right now, we're being forced to do that because of the high prices of gas and oil. This will continue. So as that continues, there'll be new technology that will come out. One of the new technologies that I have seen many visions of is a new electric car, and this car is powered not by what is on the drawing boards currently as the fuel cell, for example, or a rechargeable battery, but a whole new system, whole new process system. It's a wireless system where energy is broadcast right to vehicles, and I see that coming out. And so right now, the position of oil to me is like when we went from coal to oil. That transition period, took decades to be complete. And we're about to go through a transition from oil now to this new electric technology that will come out. So if we were to look ahead here a decade from now, cars that burn fossil fuels will be a rarity. You just will not see them. You will also see a reemergence of mass transit, the same process of vehicles for high-speed transportation vehicles. This will be a major national undertaking. In fact, much of it will get its early discussions next year. You watch by spring of next year, you'll start to see talk about it. You'll hear it on television. There'll be a political discussion as well. It's a ways away, but whenever we have a rise in the cost of the current energy that we use, we see technology being pushed to the forefront. So while there's a lot of changes, like I said, there's physical things we can do. Well, the other thing we can do has to do with consciousness. It's how we think and how we interact. I'm a firm believer that that the things that we do every day in our life, the things that we think about, the things that we say, all these things gather together in a collective consciousness. And that collective consciousness, if it's in harmony with the earth, things go smoother. It actually can prevent many I've been seeing, because when we asked, back in the 80s, is this thing inevitable, or is there a possibility that we could stop this? And the answer was, while it cannot be stopped, it can be lessened. And that the lessening is required that people's consciousness raise to a higher level. So we are at the forefront of a major shift in consciousness. One of the predictions for this year from 20 years ago was that when we get to the first decade of the new millennium, that we would see intuition in people begin to rise at high levels. And the reason that was going to rise at high levels is that we are all moving towards literally a new race of people in what I call the intuitive society, where people will just know things, and know things that are right and know things that are wrong. It'll be that kind of an understanding. It's like we're tapping into a universal computer, universal mind, where a path of least resistance, a path to a good future, is available if we will just take a few moments from our busy schedule to tune into it. And one of the things that we try to do with our institute is to provide some tools where you can do that. One of the things that we do, Cynthia's created a mandala. It's a moving mandala with pictures and sound that activates the intuitive centers. And if you go on our website at matrixinstitute.com, you can go to the links session, and there's a button there you will see for the meditation room. And if you watch that meditation, it's only 30 seconds. It doesn't take very long, but if you do that once a day, within 21 days, you will see changes in your life. And if you want to go further than that, we have, a larger program that allows you to do different levels of it. So by now, there's probably a lot of questions. I can actually, even though I'm several miles away from you folks, I can actually hear some of the questions. So why don't we start and take some questions now?
Line up and go back to that, because that's how he'll be able to see you. Who are the ones that want to ask questions? You have to get up and you have to come back here. Okay.
All right, what?
Okay, because some of them did send emails. See that little thing on top of there? That's the camera. Okay, and he can see you. Stand right in front of that.
Not send an email, but I do have a couple of questions. One of them is based on reading Dolores's book and the new earth versus the old earth. And the question is, are we going to go through the earth tribulations, or are we going to move into a different universe based on higher vibrational frequency and a more evolved consciousness?
The tribulations, it's a time period. If we look at the tribulations in a biblical sense, or that prophecy, that's already occurred. It was a time period of testing, and my information does not show me that we are going to change realities, for example, or dimensions. It does show that we are going to change individually. So if we were to look ahead here, even 5 years, we would find that we're all tuning into this higher state of consciousness. But it's like any other time period that goes through great change. Not everybody is going to jump on the train that's going to higher vibrations. And we see that now. We're in a polarized world. We see it in the electoral process. We also see it in the world where economics, where you have, there's a clear division of those that have and hold wealth and those that do not. 1% of the total of the wealth of the world is held by a few people, and so there needs to be a redistribution of wealth, or a new process. And so what I do see is the vibration of the planet does change, and people who are ready change with it. People who are not ready, it's going to take them a lot longer.
May I ask a follow-on question then regarding that? And I'm wondering if our economy then is actually being manipulated by, quote, the powers that be, so that they can orchestrate bringing in a one-world government and further polarize the United States and the rest of the world?
Yeah, as I had stated, that the wealth is controlled by a few people. That is going to change. It changes when the system that controls it changes. Right now, the world is controlled by 2 or 3 major cartels, oil being one of them, banking being another, and military complexes a third. And those only survive if there's wars, or if people are willing to give up their power financially, or as long as we're willing to continue to use oil, fossil fuels. If we slow down that, or even stop that, then that power doesn't have that same grip on us. And so while they control it, their days are literally numbered.
Well, that's good news. Since there's no one else, may I ask 2 more questions? I was wondering regarding the earthquake that took place in Japan yesterday, if that is one of your indicators or triggers for additional earth changes on the West Coast?
Could you repeat that, please? I didn't hear it.
I was wondering, based on the earthquake in Japan yesterday, if that is one of the triggers that you have for additional earth changes taking place on the West Coast of the United States.
It does. Have you read my material? 'Cause I'm just wondering if you're tapping into something, or you read it.
Yes, I'm actually on your mailing list for the Matrix Institute and have
Okay.
been for a number of years.
We have, there's a scenario that I was given years ago. It's called the 4 Quake Scenario. And it states that if a quake of a magnitude 7 or greater occurs in Japan, and this year we targeted Honshu as the one to watch for, and this recent quake was in Honshu. When that quake happens, then within weeks, and it could be up to 2 to 6 weeks, if a second quake occurs somewhere in the Indian Ocean or another section of the Pacific Ocean of a same magnitude, then that indicates that the scenario has begun. The third scenario, which would occur several weeks later, it would have to be at the same magnitude. In this case, it would be a 7.0 magnitude. That would occur in South America. And then the fourth and final scenario would occur somewhere along the west coast of America. And so this recent quake, I believe, has started a new scenario. These scenarios, sometimes we have found they do complete themselves, but the magnitudes can change. And so this was created to give us an indicator, an early warning indicator, if you will, of events to watch for. So if we see these things start to unfold, we can say, okay, the potential is higher now that we may experience some geophysical activity somewhere in the west coast of America. We're clearly in a scenario now, which would mean that sometime in July or August that we could see activity along the west coast. At the very least, I believe we will see extensive swarming of quakes there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Greetings. Do you see anything happening in the near future or whenever on either Yellowstone or the New Madrid Fault?
We had a little activity in the past year in the New Madrid region, and those were devastating quakes, a long time ago, and so I do not see the same kind of activity in the near future in that area. Nor, nor do I see it in Yellowstone in particular, but I do see that kind of activity in Washington and Oregon. So those are areas that I see, and it's very possible that the magma that sits under Yellowstone, I mean, that was perhaps the largest eruption in the archaeological record ever. And so things tend to repeat themselves, so it's a concern, and it's a concern of mine too. But I have not seen an eruption of the magnitude that created that in the first place. But I have seen visions of things in the Northwest, especially around Mount Rainier, Mount Shasta, that whole region there. So those are areas that I think need to be watched.
I have a question, please, about a little closer, about the economy and how to prepare for it. Is this a good time to have a little gold and silver? And should you keep it at home in a safe or in an IRA or bank account or investment broker?
The markets themselves, or at least the stock markets, we're going to see declines, and that thing is this financial crisis that we've come through with real estate and banking is not over, not by a long shot. We have more bad news coming, and metals has always been a safe hedge on an economy that declines. So, for example, silver is currently at $16 a troy ounce, and gold is changes, but it's been as high as 1,000, and now it's the $700-800 range. Those metals will increase in value. The questions everybody has to ask themselves is that A, where do I keep it? Because fear gets in immediately. Where do I keep this so it won't be taken? And in the 30s, gold was confiscated. And so there's a lot of fear now that that'll happen again. And my information says that was then. Today it would never be allowed. It wouldn't matter if the government said that they wanted to do it. It wouldn't allow. It just wouldn't happen. People would never go along with it. So metals themselves can be, a safety hedge on it. Safety deposit boxes are great places, to keep your valuables. If you are, trying to keep things, one of the things that I find that's I've advised over the years is rare coins. Rare coins are coins that are certified by a certification organization, and they're rare. They can be old. They can be 50 years old, 100 years old. And these coins, besides the value of the metal, have a numismatic value, which can be very high. And those things can easily be traded and disposed of with a collector. So one of the things that I suggest is that find a local coin shop in your area and visit them and talk to them. There's also a great publication called Coin Collector. It's on the newsstand, or you can go online and get it. And Coin Collector will give you some good insights and also sources of all kinds of metals. But it does require some knowledge to do it. So one of the things that I suggest is that, start very, very small and find a coin shop in your area. If you have to travel 50 miles to a place, it's well worth doing it. And the owners of coin shops just love to talk about coins. They'll talk to you for hours if you let them. But look into to rare coins, certified rare coins.
Thank you.
Well,
yeah, Gordon, I would like to ask you a question in relationship to Earth changes, and you were just commenting before about the 4 different scenarios. Are those 4 different scenarios related to what is commonly referred to as the Earth changes?
Earth changes is a generic title that was coined many years ago, even before Edgar Casey's time. and then Edgar Casey picked up on it half a century later. And it dealt with the fact that there were many visionaries in the 18th century, 19th century, and if we include Nostradamus, the 15th, that were stating that the Earth was going to go through great changes. Some of the theories were it was going to go through changes because the people were wicked. Other people said it was just a cycle, and I've covered the different scenarios of Earth changes. The four-quake scenario that I state was just one of many scenarios that I have received over the years. We've had so many questions of people saying, is there any way we can tell when larger quakes will happen in America? Because since we live here, we have students and members all over the world, but the masses of our base are here in the United States, and perhaps 50% of our total membership is somewhere out on the West Coast. And so the scenario was to give an early warning sign. There are other scenarios that I have come up with too that would help in other areas. For example, in the Middle East, there's one. I also had one that dealt with the Bahamas and Florida. So there's different scenarios of things to watch for. The major one of the four-quake scenario relates directly to effects of California. Now there's others. If you look at my map, if someone hasn't put one up on the wall, it might be a good idea to do that. The North American map, and what you will see in the North American map is three red lines that divide up the United States. Now those Earth changes are part of a scenario that I saw that when things get really rough, where the tectonic plates themselves buckle, when the crust of the Earth shifts and breaks up, it's going to break up in three different time periods. And I mark those time periods on my map so you can see after the first one what will happen. The first one kind of takes California and creates a series of islands, 150 in number. The second one pushes it back into Nevada and goes down to the Baja. And the third one takes it into Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, that area. And each time there becomes a new map. And then the final one is that the eastern United States and the western United States, where the Mississippi is currently, that kind of separates by several hundred miles. And we see a large waterway running through there. And if you look at that North American map, I tried to come up with these maps to answer all the questions that I've had, thousands upon thousands of questions over the years, and try to put it into one graphic illustration to say, this is what may happen. There's nothing that's 100% assured. This was, when I looked at it, that was the reality of the future. That reality has not changed in 28 years of doing this. Those visions are still the same. The only thing we don't know is the date of this. But we do have the warning signs to watch for. And overall, that's what Earth changes are.
Okay. Zachariah Sitchin has written quite a bit, and he talks about the planet Nibiru. Now, it has been suggested that the so-called planet X is Nibiru, and that when it's due to come back around the sun, it's going to raise hob with the planets. Do you see anything along those lines?
I've had that question several times, and the information from my source was that while there was what we might call rogue planets in the ancient past that have passed through this sun system, there is none that's going to come in a very specific cycle. So my information would be that no, I don't see that happening. I do, however, see changes in Mars and their satellites. Phoebus, for example, is one. Phobos, I see that becoming a problem in the future, but not because of Planet X.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Last night on the local news
in Fort Smith and Fayetteville. They mentioned the bird flu. We have OK Foods, Tyson Foods, all these chicken farms and plants where they process the chickens. They said that they buried, I don't know what the numbers were, and we're checking a 6-mile radius around that farm or area. Can you see anything on that?
I believe because of the population growth of this planet, as well as the environmental changes, that a pandemic is almost assured to occur. I don't know when, but if someone said, do you think it could happen, within 5 years? And my answer would be yes, and probably earlier than later. So I do see that as a problem. We're seeing a lot of problems in our food chains right now. I mean, we wonder, how can this happen continuously? We've got, we had the problems with lettuce. We had problems with tomatoes. And it's because we're producing more and more food, and we're producing it in such a way that is not in harmony with good agriculture. It's designed to get it to the market as fast as possible and let it ripen on the way, or force ripen it. And they're coming from foreign countries that we in the U.S. have no control over it. And the number of containers that we inspect, for example, is a small portion. I don't think we inspect 1% of the containers that come into the country. So it's inevitable that we're going to have these kind of problems. The question really that I ask myself is that, do we have the technology now that when this does happen, to do something about it? And I'm hopeful that we will.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My question is about this ascension that we're all hearing about that's supposed to be happening pretty soon now. Is there any way that you see this coming, and is there any definite sign that we would know that the ascension is beginning?
That again is another question that has been asked me many times over the years, and my source has said that that a lot of times it's misunderstood what the ascension really is about, at least from a prophetic point of view. And my source says that what happens is that the consciousness of humankind rises to higher levels as the planet itself speeds up. So if we look at all around us in our society globally, we see that things are happening so fast. I call it like instant karma. Instead of waiting 2 or 5 or 100 lifetimes, it happens almost in the same lifetime. And we're seeing it. The internet is another example. The technology we're using right now is an indication of how fast things are moving. We went to a birthday party today for our granddaughter, and one of the babysitters was there, and I'm guessing that she's probably 15. While she's doing it, she's sitting there texting with one hand on her little iPod, and she's talking to another friend, and her fingers are moving so fast, and at the same time she's doing that, she's carrying on a conversation with somebody else. So we're seeing this higher state of consciousness being experienced at many, many levels. The computer games, while I think are a major problem, has another side to it, and that is that it quickens the consciousness, allows you to multitask, where you're able to handle more and more information. Now, the information that people aren't aware of that they're getting is intuitive information, and that's flowing in. And so as we go faster and faster, we rise to higher levels, or we ascend to a higher state of consciousness. As far as the planet itself and thousands of people, or the select 144,000 or whatever the current belief is out there happening, I don't see that, and I don't believe it ever will. But I do believe that we are ready for a major jump in consciousness, and I believe it's already started, and I think it's just going to go faster and faster. And if we get on that train, and if our intent is a good intent, will have good lives, no matter what happens around us.
Thank you.
Welcome.
You've talked about some of the changes that are going to be happening in other institutions. Any insight as to what will be happening to the institutions that are entrusted with the education of our kids?
One of the first things that's going to happen in 2009 is the No Child Left Behind goes away. There will be a new educational member of a cabinet member who will bring about great changes in the educational system, amazing changes. Kind of a system whereby when you discuss, for example, history of Rome, you would be actually interacting with it. In other words, it's not going to be slides, a chalkboard, and discussion, but actually you're going to be living part of that life. And that, again, is all part of this higher state of consciousness, because the students and the teacher collectively are going to tune in to we'll call it a collective past life, a past life of a society. Because not only can we tap into our own past lives, or others with permission, we can also tap into the experiences of a society, like Rome or Greece or Atlantis or Mu or whatever. We can easily travel there and live that, or live it through experience. And so that educational process where it becomes interactive and role-playing, this is going to start in 2009, 2010. So the educational system as we know it is going to change. It's going to take many years. It'll probably take maybe 8 to 10 years before it changes entirely, but you will see the changes next year.
Hello, I have a couple of questions. One of them, some specific suggestions, tasks that we can do to raise our own consciousness and participate in raising other people's consciousness.
There are 5 levels in the physical realm where you can use or expand upon those 5 senses, if you will, to increase your awareness and your sensitivity to higher states of consciousness. For example, sound is perhaps one of the more powerful instruments. Music that's played, Baroque type of music, Bach. This music, if you could just put it on, close your eyes, and one of the things we found in some of our workshops is that if you can sit facing, with your face facing, maybe 10 or 20 degrees east of north. So it would be on a compass, as the compass would point, it'd be around 10 to 15 degrees, we'll say. If you face that direction while you're playing this music, and just become aware of parts of your body that are reacting. So in order to get to higher states of consciousness, we have to tune our bodies. And one of the biggest problems we have is we have this noise running in our brain. You know, we're thinking about where we're going to be later on. We're thinking about our kids, our grandchildren, family members, friends. We're always thinking about we're thinking about something. And that keeps us from achieving a higher state. And so the music, what it does is it eventually gets absorbed into our bodies, and it kind of quiets the mind and allows you to reach for higher states. Aroma will do it too, or the ability of smell. If you go out sometimes, especially if an herb garden, and if there's a certain herb, flower, or fragrance that somehow just stimulates you, get a hold of that. And if you can't find the actual herb, I bet you can find some oil that has that scent in it. And take that and let that aroma stimulate you. Again, I find facing north, 15, 20 degrees east of north while you're doing this. And do this for about 20 minutes. You don't have to do this for hours, and you don't have to do kinds of gymnastics. You just have to allow your senses to go to heightened senses, higher levels. There is, the kingdoms can be used as well. One of the very first experiences that I had after the visions was that I was out walking in the woods, and I came across a tree. And I remember it was at an herb farm, and I remember coming over and looking at the tree, and I remember just putting my hand on the tree, and sometimes, I think we all do that. We just kind of tap on the tree. We're not trying to do anything, we're just feeling the bark, I guess. And instantly, there was a rapport between the tree and me. And I, at that time, I thought I was losing my mind, and it wasn't a big surprise to me. But in a microsecond, I got all this information about this tree. And I remember I went inside and spoke to one of the people who worked there. I said, by any chance, did that tree go through a hurricane in this year? And did this also happen? Did this happen? She said, yeah. Did you read that in our flyer? And I said, no. So she handed me the flyer, and there was that information. So, the question always is that did I intuit the future of this report or this brochure, and somehow psychically I read it in advance, or did the tree really tell me? Well, since then, I've done a lot of work with nature and animals in particular, and I find that I can adjust my vibration to the vibration of any of the kingdoms at will now. So I can, if it's a cat, I can do a cat, a dog, a horse, a tree, plant. Instantly, I can become in rapport with it. And through that rapport, I can learn about it. It actually teaches me about it. And we can all do that. So you can try any of the things that I've just suggested, but at least try one of them. The reason that we're not reaching higher states of consciousness as a collective body is because we're just too busy. We're too busy trying to survive, economically and emotionally. And we need to put aside a little time. 20 minutes a day will do it. And if we put that 20 minutes to any of the things I've suggested, we will go collectively to a higher state. And individually, some of us will go there earlier.
Thank you. I have one other question. I was intrigued by the electric car idea, and I was wondering if it's some form of magnetic energy that you're talking about.
The car that I see, the first car that's going to be successful is the car called the Volt, V-O-L-T, and that'll be on the market here shortly. That's a rechargeable car. It's a small car. You can plug it in at night and recharge it, and it'll go 200 miles, and it'll also have a very small, like a lawnmower engine type in the car to get you in emergencies. But that's just the beginning. That kind of starts it. The thing that I see is the transmission of energy. Just the way we transmit radio and television waves now, and our radios and television sets pick it up. Imagine that what's being transmitted is a form of power. It's a power that comes in. That power, wherever there's an antenna to pick it up, whether it's a car or a home, it doesn't matter. Takes in that energy, becomes part of the car. It becomes stored in the car. It runs the car. So it's electrical, and it's electromagnetic in part of the transmission, but it's really a different energy system entirely. And the closest thing that I could say is it's a form of laser technology, where just as we might have cell phone towers that can broadcast and pick up, you would have these kind of laser towers that would broadcast. So it takes care of cities and mass transit systems, and then in rural settings is a little different technology. There will be eventually a technology that uses the Earth's magnetic system, the actual Earth's magnet system, to be able to tap into that wherever you are, and be able to use that energy. That's a ways off yet, but that's another one that's coming.
And one last question. On one of my trips to Mexico, I met a man.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes, I said on one of my trips to Mexico, I met a man and had the most fascinating conversations about extended period of time that he had lived strictly from sunlight, no food. And I was just wondering if that's anything that you have heard about or you could tap into right now, or anything that you could say about that.
I have met people who had claimed to be what they called breatharians. They did not consume food, or at least they claimed they did not. And I had no reason to believe them, to not believe them. It is possible, just as masters in the past, whether it's 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, there's always been masters who have come to the planet to kind of show our potential, show what we can do. And people who reach those levels, all things become possible. The physical itself gets put aside, and they're able to draw from a higher energy source. And that higher energy source is freely available everywhere. And it's that energy source that will be used for one of these power systems that I talked about earlier. So it is possible, and I have met two different people who both said that they were, and again, I tend to believe them at their word.
Hi, I have two questions. One has to do with the earth changes regarding the core, the earth core. Some of the works that I've read of Greg Braden, and I haven't read them recently, so I may have this information inaccurate or incomplete, but the resulting rotation of that inner core would change the magnetics of the earth, would actually change the rotation of the earth, would eventually change so that instead of the sun rising in the east, it would rise in the west. And that as a result of that, our current form of electricity would not work. Can you give us any enlightenment on that, please?
The current electrical system, regardless of what happens with the Earth's magnetic field, or even the shifting of the lithosphere or the crust, the changing of where the sun rises is part of my vision process. I have seen that. I've actually had one vision that repeated probably 100 times, showing that day that it happened. I know it happened. I remember after the first few times I said, I got to be aware, see if I can figure out the time that this occurred, and I know it occurred about midday, and it was in the summertime that it occurred. I have no idea of the year, but it definitely was a summer event, and the thing changed. And what had happened is that we had a pole shift, where the axis itself had changed and the Earth's field had shifted. However, regardless of that, the systems that we use now or we use in the future would remain. It would not change. The electrical systems that I have seen fail have more to do with what we call solar flares. One of the things that I had received insights on was that as we got into at the end of the 20th century and into the 21st century, we would see larger sunspots, larger solar flares, and the sunspot cycle would change, and those things have occurred. And so what I see is larger solar flares. Now, every time there's going to be a solar flare, we now have technology in our satellites where most of the satellites can turn away. They have the ability to turn on little rockets. It turns it away from the solar flare if it's heading towards Earth, and they'll protect it. Sometimes some satellites don't have that ability, and sometimes the flare can be so devastating as to blind the satellite. I see those kind of events occurring in the next 3 years. Next 3 to 4 years, I see that. Now, if there's enough of a solar impact on the Earth, there's a process that many of us may have even seen. You see it all the way down to your neck of the woods sometimes. It's called the Northern Lights, or the Aurora Borealis. And If there is enough of a charge from the sun, and if it directly impacts the Earth, in other words, the flare is pointing towards the Earth when it occurs, it is possible that it could hit all of the transmission lines. So if you were to look back at the Earth, let's say from a mile or two high, in a clear day, you would see nothing but wires everywhere. We have transmission lines and telephone wires. There is literally billions of miles of wire all over the Earth, and it acts like a huge lightning rod. And so a flare striking the grid of the Earth would knock out power. It would knock out generators, and we would find ourselves with damaged computers. It would be what I would call an international disaster. And I believe that's in the cards in the future. That will happen.
Thank you very much. I'm getting this email to stop. So thank you.
Have you here, and I know everyone really appreciates it, and I thank you doing this for us. Okay.
Well, thank you. I would stand up, but you can't see me.
And we're running out of time here now then. Right. Goodbye. Bye. Bye.